If you want an informative and a very emotional look at the impact of the Green Revolution and even just modern day technology on a certain region of the world, then today's book just might be for you. Today I'll be reviewing Cobalt Red by Siddharth Kara. Welcome to Spencer Reads Everything. I'm your host, Spencer Duncan, and today we'll be taking a look at another one of the general nonfiction finalists for the Pulitzer Prize, Cobalt Red, How the Blood of the Congo Powers Our Lives by Siddharth Kara. The name says pretty much the most important stuff about this book. It's taking a look at cobalt, which is an incredibly important mineral for us to build batteries, and therefore we find it not just in all of our battery-powered technology, but almost any of your technology is going to have some kind of cobalt in it, which means that it is something that we need a lot of. The Democratic Republic of the Congo is the country with probably the greatest access. It probably has the most cobalt in it, but on top of that, the fact that it has a relatively weak central government and so many outside countries and companies can have relatively easy access to this place is one of the reasons why it's the center of focus for so many people in building up their new green technology or just technology in general. In this book, the author, Siddharth Kara, he does give some details trying to give you some idea of why exactly the Democratic Republic of the Congo is playing such an important role, but he is really focused on going from town to town and trying to see exactly what the conditions are like for the mining that is taking place. He does give other details. He tries to give some background information, which is an important part of the book, but it's by no means the center of the book. By and large, he is most interested in trying to see what it is actually like for individuals from town to town. I think there's this perception that when it comes to mining, especially in a country like the Democratic Republic of Congo and with so many international interests, that a lot of the mining efforts would be massive. But actually something that you quickly discover is that a lot of it is done by a relatively small group of people, which also means that the safety standards are incredibly low. And that's probably the thing that he's trying to investigate the most. Although the mining is going to have a much greater impact than just on the hazards that it brings to the people involved in it, it is also making a lot of the areas which is being mined useless for anything else. It is stripping a very beautiful country of its natural beauty as you're trying to mine it quickly and as efficiently as possible, or in some cases just as brutally as possible, to trying to get through the process as quickly as possible. He essentially gives a detail of all of the towns that he goes to, what kinds of individuals he meets, and what kinds of horrible experiences they've had in the mining process. Most of it's going to include people losing siblings, sons, husbands in the mines, or in some cases they're going to be permanently harmed, in many cases having legs or arms that have been amputated because of a cave-in, or all the other byproducts that are just a long life of doing this work. Even if you haven't had any dramatic cave-ins or anything to happen to you individually, it's just back-breaking work. And so over the years, many of the individuals involved are just going to see the toll taken on their body. There seems to be this effort at trying to get as close to a tragedy as possible. And I don't mean just to witness a tragedy, but to get as close to possible to the individuals that experienced it, the individuals that were responsible for it in one way or another, whether it was just overcrowding. He doesn't spend too much time actually getting to the people that are running mines, especially since a lot of the mines are tentatively, if not controlled, at least they report to some kind of Chinese, Indian, or occasionally an American company. And so he has a hard time getting to the people that could answer some of his questions. But the most dramatic of all of his visits is when he himself does finally witness an actual mine collapse. That seems to be the most poignant moment of the book, is when after discussing just how frequently these collapses are and how damaging they are to people and their family, is when he himself does actually experience it, and he tries to get as close as he can to it, and he is of course being held off by the security guards and the police force or the military, whoever it is preventing people from getting too close. And immediately, the families from the community are also just trying to get in and see what happens. And there are people's lives that are lost, and there are families that are permanently affected by this tragedy that he personally experiences. This is a tragedy that is taking place in a country that has a long legacy of issues. It first came on the map with the ruling of the Belgian King Leopold. A lot of people are familiar with the book King Leopold's Ghost. He addresses that. That deals with the extraction of rubber from the Congo and the impact that it had on the indigenous people. You've probably all seen the pictures of people whose arms were cut off because they didn't collect enough rubber. And it's a country that, as rich as it is in minerals and other resources, it has constantly been plagued with its own internal struggles, its inability to have a functioning government. Of course, after colonialism, this is one of the most tragically affected areas in the world where some of its leaders became incredibly wealthy, but at the cost of the individuals throughout the country. It's also a country that is mostly rural, so even though there are some cities that are pretty stable, and when we talk about the development of the Democratic Republic of Congo, most of the cities would probably feel pretty detached from all of this discussion, but it is a predominantly rural country, so those urban areas would actually be an exception to the rule when discussing how impactful this tragedy is across the country. So who is this book for? I have to confess that this book is similar to most books that get pushed for Pulitzer Prizes, and that is that I feel like the story they're trying to tell is incredibly important. However, they also sometimes struggle with giving me any concrete solutions, giving me any real kind of guidance. In their mind, as journalists, their sole goal is to document a travesty, which I think he does well, but you may have a problem coming away from this with any kind of insight as to what should change. You might think, oh, I want the people living in the Democratic Republic of Congo to have better lives. But you're not very likely to come away saying, oh, well, I'm just not going to use anything with cobalt in it. That's simply not an option. So I would recommend this to people that generally enjoy, or at least get something out of, whether it is some kind of self-righteous rage or just some kind of anger. So I would say that I recommend this for people that generally enjoy those type of nonfiction books. Stuff written by journalists that is probably going to enrage you, make you angry, make you feel a lot of different emotions, but by the end of the book, you probably don't have any kind of conclusion or any real sense of catharsis or any idea of what exactly to do next. I wouldn't recommend this for people that are looking for a detailed exploration of the way we go green, or a detailed exploration of modern Democratic Republic of Congo. This is only one facet of a much larger and much more complicated country. So I think that it has some shortcomings in terms of its scope, or at least in terms of what it's trying to provide for the public. But I definitely think that it's a good read if you are just curious about what are some of the consequences and what are some of the knock-on effects of trying to have not just a more green and a smaller carbon impact, but this is something that you see in almost all of our modern technologies. And I'm not just talking about cobalt, but just the process of mining and resource gathering. This is very much something that has a long-term consequence in not just the Democratic Republic of Congo, but really anywhere that has a lot of resources, but has a limited or an undermined infrastructure or political system. And that is going to be an ongoing issue in an increasingly interconnected world, as we find ourselves in need of more and more resources that are found all throughout the world, and we'll continue to see a lot of international forces. This book, of course, picks on China and India. Those are the two big countries and companies from those countries that it pinpoints as the ones that really have a dramatic impact on the mines and the mining process. But it's worth saying that we could probably find almost any major mineral or any major resource that's necessary, not just for going green, but for living in a modern world, that has dramatic impact on any type of country like this that finds itself rich in a resource, but poor in its ability to control its own destiny. Of course, I want to know what you guys have to think about Cobalt Red, what's your thoughts on exactly the scope of it, or your thoughts on whether it should have won the Pulitzer Prize for nonfiction, or if you think maybe a different book should have gotten more attention than this one. I'd love to hear everyone's thoughts. Leave those in the comments, but don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that notification button, and until next time, keep those pages turning.